In this video, we will be installing Archlinux manually, but we will be using a virtual machine and we will be using virt-manager to manage that virtual machine. Here's our screenshot. Let's go over to see what the system will look like. This is the system we are going to build. It's running KDE Plasma 6. It's got everything actually installed on this particular one. Before we rebuild it, I actually included the KDE applications meta package. So it has just everything installed. But when I walk through it, I will skip that package just to save time. But I recommend, if you're using a full Archlinux installation, that you install it so that you get access to all the goodness that KDE Plasma kind of desktop has to offer. Okay, so this is the, let me just show you. I don't think I do. Let that do its thing. Over here. And I'm also using a Breeze color scheme that is Capuchin. I'm using Capuchin. So this is in a virtual machine and we are using virt-GL, but I will be showing you the LLVM type version as well because it runs a little bit faster and better than this one. But this works as well. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now that we've seen all that we want to see with this, I am going to shut this down and we're going to delete it and start over. I'm just going to force this off. I'm using a virt-viewer here, part of virt-manager. And here's virt-manager. It might be in a smaller window on your system, but let's show where we can get all this information from. So if you want to follow along with all the stuff that I'm doing today, you can go to github.com, programming rainbow, and it will be /Archlinux. And inside there, I have 4 different versions of this. 2 of them are using archinstall, the installer script, either on bare metal or in virt-manager. And then there are 2 that are going to be, only one of them is being filmed right now, but that will be manually installing Archlinux either in virt-manager or on bare metal. And all of them are also going to show you how to set it up and how to, even up to Firefox, and how to use Xrdp as well. Okay, so since this one we are using virt-manager, but we're using manual install, let's go into this one. And we have all kinds of just 1,000 different bits of information here. But the very best, the very top one, let's just talk about, I'm using as a basis for this the Archlinux installation guide. So that is right over here. So you'll want to also lean on this for any kind of reference. And I'll be kind of possibly poking back and forth. But before we start doing that, let's just talk about virt-manager. So virt-manager, we need a couple things. We need to install virt-manager with a couple different packages. We also need to add ourselves to libvirt group so we can use it correctly. And we need to start up the virt-manager service. Okay, so right up here, I have all this right here, and I basically have sudo pacman -s, and then I added the needed switch, so it's not going to reinstall something that you already have installed. But the packages we need are virt-manager, virt-viewer, QEM desktop, not the base version, just we want to include the desktop packages, and DNS mask Q. So I'm just going to copy this command right here, pull up my terminal, and we'll add it in. I already have these packages, so since I'm using the needed switch, it's going to tell me that they're already installed. We also need to make sure that you are in the libvirt group. So we can use the user mod, we can use -a for append, and G for group, and then we're going to put the group libvirt, and then you need to put your username, whatever user that you want to have access to this. So I've already done this. If you don't know what groups you're already in, you can just type in groups. So I'm already in the libvirt group, so I'm good there. And now that you have the packages installed and you're in the group, I cannot remember if you need to reboot your system when you're adding yourself to groups. So that may be a necessary step. I actually can't think if I know the answer to that one. But we do need to start up the service. So if you do need to reboot, start the service first. So, or at least enable it so it'll be there on your next boot up. But to enable service, we'll use sudo system control systemctl enable libvirt, and that will enable it to automatically start every time you boot up your system, but it won't actually start the service. So we actually need to run the command start libvirt. And that service is already started on my machine, so I don't need to do that. I'll just use the sudo systemctl, and I'll do info, or is it status right there. And we can see that it is active and it is enabled. I just press Q to get out of that. Okay, so I want to just talk about a couple things real quick before we make our virtual machine. We do want to give ourselves access to the to be able to edit the XML in virt-manager, and we also want to make sure that we have this QEMU KVM available. Sometimes it's not showing, and I'll just show you how to do that real quick. And I think those are the only two things, so let's just do that. So under Edit Preferences, you'll see here, Enable XML Editing. This will allow you to edit features that may not be there, or to see if something is enabled. Just because the check mark shows that it's enabled doesn't mean it really is. So this allows you to see the actual XML and to edit it if you want. So we want that enabled. And if you don't see this right here, this QEMU /KVM, if you do not see that, you can go up here to Add Connection and see the hypervisor. It might have nothing there, or might have something else there. You want to put it on the QEMU KVM, and right here on Auto Connect, you want that to be checked, and then you want to click Connect. Okay, I've already done that. I already have these set up, so that's all we need there. And now, when you run through the normal procedure to create a new virtual machine with virt-manager, it will allow you to create a QCOW2 kind of disk space image, an image that your system will be installed onto. And it actually dedicates all the memory that you're going to use. So if you give it 20 gigs, it's going to actually take up 20 gigs right away. You might not have that space. So if you kind of want it to just be not used until whatever you use to fill it up, if you want it to dynamically fill up until it reaches its maximum size, you can just do it manually here, and I will just show that real quick. So in Archlinux, var lib virt images is where these images are stored at. Okay, and these are owned by root. So I can see the size of this one is 8.7 gigs. Now when I made this, it was 16 gigs, but it's not taking up 16 gigs. It will allow me to go up to 16 gigs, but it doesn't necessarily take it up right now. And that's nice if you have a bunch of different machines, or you're really have to manage your space. You might not want it to be taking up the maximum amount of space the entire time. So we can create these at the command line, and they'll be very small first. So I'm going to, now that we've seen this, I'm going to delete the other one right here. I'm just going to right click on it and delete it. And it's going to actually ask me if I want to, it's asking me here if I want to delete the ISO image. I do not want to delete that. But it does ask me also, do I want to delete the QCOW2 image for the storage? Okay, and I do want to delete that, so that's going to disappear. But the ISO image, the install image for Archlinux, I'm not going to delete that, because then I would have to re-download it. Okay, so that's gone now. Let's go here, and we can ls in here. Whoops. I'm going to cd in here. Well, I can just ls that, but I'm actually going to cd in there. So I'm going to change directory, so I'm actually in that directory now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually create it. So right here, if you see this sudo qem tac image create -f, and it's QCOW2, that's kind of the type of the image. And we're just going to call it Archlinux. You can call it something else. The name is arbitrary. and then it's .qcow2, and then the size that you want to allocate. And this size is the maximum size that it can be. It's not the size that's going to be allocated right now, which is the good part about doing it this way. So I'm just going to do that. And we need to use the sudo because this, again, is going to have root. It's going to be root owned. So I'm just going to, mine says 15 gigs. I'll say 16. Doesn't really matter. It'll be good enough for what we're doing. Sudo qcow, yeah, everything looks good. And I'm just going to leave it this Archlinux name. That's fine for me. Now, if we ls here again, we can see that we have it, but it's only taken up 200 kilobytes. Okay. As we install Archlinux onto it, it'll fill up. But right now, it's only taking 200. So that's an alternative way to create the image. Invert create. Okay, so now we are going to start creating our new. So there is an actual kind of takes you to step by step, creating a new virtual machine. Let's just do that. And I skipped a step. Let me just walk back for 1 second and show you that up here at the top, it assumes that you've already downloaded Archlinux. So we go here, we open up downloads, or you can just Google it. But I'm going to pick the closest mirror to me. I'm in the UK, so I'm going to be clicking United Kingdom mirror. I'll just show this top one here. Okay, and you have the name of the actual file that you're looking for. It's going to be Archlinux, and this is the year, the month, the day, and it's a x86-64. This is the image, but I actually don't like the one with the whole date in it. I just want the name simplified, and this is the exact same image again, just with the simplified name, just a more generic name. So I've already downloaded this, so you don't have to watch me download that. And it's about 1.1 gigabytes, so you will need that image. Okay, so now that we understand that that's downloaded, I'm going to walk through this. So it says local install media. That is the ISO image we just downloaded. So I'm going to click forward on that. I'm going to browse to it, and it's going to be in downloads. Here it is right here. Okay. And down here, it's automatically understood that this is Archlinux. If it does not, just uncheck this automatic and type in Archlinux here, and that'll be fine. And now, since we're using a graphical user interface, 1 gig is not enough for this, so I'm going to put it to 4 gigabytes. You could give it more, but I think you need at least 4. You might be able to get a by with 2, but I think if you have the ability to give it 4 gigs, if your system memory has enough memory to be able to do this, I think you should give 4, and then you're just fine with 4. It'll work just fine. And you can maybe give half the amount of CPU. Since I have 16, I'm going to give it 8. That's just because we're going to compile something later. So I do want to give it some CPUs. And here, right here, this is where it's going to ask to make a 20 gigabyte created disk image. This is the qcow thing we were just doing. Now, if I do it right here, it actually takes up 20 gigs of space. But since we've already created, I can go down here and I can manually select it, and it's going to be in default. So it's in that var lib virt images. And see here, the size is 16 gigabytes, even though it's not really taking up 16 gigs. We can choose that one since we've already created it. We can go forward on it. And I'm going to leave the name Archlinux. There's no reason to change it for me. You can change it if you want. The OS type, the install media, the memory, all that. Now, I do want to use I don't want to use grub to boot the system. I want to use systemd boot. So to be able to use systemd boot, we cannot use BIOS master boot record, the old style from like 20, 30 years ago. We need to be using the more modern UEFI. We want to be using that instead. The only problem is the only time it lets you do that is here. But however, we can do it in XML later. So I'm going to click this, but if you forget to click or you already have a system, it can be changed later, but it's just not through the GUI interface. So I'm going to click Customize Configuration before install. And that's what gets me to this screen right here. The screen is not there later in Overview. It doesn't show. So from BIOS, I want to change it to UEFI. And that's going to be fine on there. Now let me just show a couple other little strange bits. So the display, it's asking me if I want to apply the changes. So this display, I'm going to change this to Spice Server. And since I'm going to be allowing virt-GL, I want to have OpenGL. And if I click this down here, it's going to tell me that the listening type needs to be none. That's right here, listening type. This needs to be none. And that's fine for that. I'm going to apply that. And now I'm going to go to the other one, the video. It might say something else here, the video and something here. Could be virt-io or something else. Now this one where it's a bit buggy. If I click virt-io and if I were to click 3D acceleration, right? If I apply it, it probably will say that I got 3D acceleration now. See, it says right here, I have 3D acceleration. It's quite buggy. If I switch it back to say XQL, right? Now it doesn't have 3D acceleration, which is fine. It's not there. But now if I go back to virt-io and see this 3D acceleration check is already checked, if I apply that, it's gone. And now if I actually boot up the machine, I will not have access to it. Even though this check mark says it's there, it's really a bit goofy. And also there's no ability to set the default resolution. So when we log into like SDDM, it'll be a very low resolution and it'll be the old 3x2 or 3x4 aspect ratio. So right here, we can also change the default resolution. So I'm just going to show that. So I'm kind of talking about all that stuff here. The virt-io gives you access to OpenGL and 3D acceleration, and I'm on an AMD system, and it is not actually faster on my system to do this. It's actually slower. Slower for the desktop, slower for video playback, slower for the Mesa GL demos. It just runs everything slower. But it does give you desktop animations, but they're slower. If you use QXL, on my system at least, like I said, you could try both ways. On my system, it's faster. I do have transparency on my desktop, but I do not have animations. But it's still faster. It plays video faster, and it actually plays the Mesa demos, the OpenGL demos. It actually plays them faster, even though it's all software rendered. There is no acceleration or OpenGL happening here. So on my system, at least, it's faster to use the QXL than it is to use the virt-GL, but you might want to try either way. But remember when you're using the virt-GL to make sure that this does exist. But see this line right down here? Right here is where we can set a default resolution. So I'm just going to grab this whole second bit right here. I'm going to use QXL. So I'm just going to copy the whole thing here. And where it says video here, yeah, it's just the video part. Leave the two video ends there. Leave the lower video and the top video for the XML there. And I just put those in. I'm going to apply that. If we go back, it just says it's QXL, but if we're looking here, we have a resolution. Now, if I start flipping these back and forth, the resolution always stays, even though the 3D acceleration still is buggy, but the resolution does stay there. So that's why we gave it the ability to edit the XML. Later on, if you need to reboot from the install media, you can just go to boot options here, and you can just click on the CD thing to add it, because it's going to do it one time for us, but then it's going to remove it. So if you need to later on, you can click on it here, you can click on the CD here, and you're going to have to re-put this here because it's going to remove it with this whole this installation setup thing that we're in right now. Okay, so I think we have everything running. I'm just going to see if it starts. You have to kind of cross your fingers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Looks like it's good. Now, since it's a bit hard for me to switch back and forth between this virtual machine because of the way my key combinations are to switch back and forth, I'm actually going to SSH into this. It'll make it easier for you guys to see the text, and it'll make it easier for me to deal with. So when this boots up, it's already going to have SSH daemon available. so I can SSH into it, but it has a root. It's running as a root user, but the root user does not have a password. So I'm going to set the password. That's passwd, and I'm going to just put in secret. And again, this is just to give us a password so I can SSH into it. And now if I come up here, well, I also want to find out what my IP address is. So I can say IP space A, and I'm going to look for 192.168, and in virt-manager, it uses .122, and then there's some other number after it. For me, it looks like it's 95. You can also click on this button here on the top next to the image, it's the I for information, I believe. And if you go to the NIC, the network interface card, and you can see IP address, and you can even update it here to make sure it is the correct number and it says the same number. So since I have this, I can actually pull this up, my normal terminal in my host system. I'm just going to cd into the top level directory, and I'm going to use SSH. Now, I need to use root, and it needs to be the address, the IP address, and I believe it was 95. Okay. It's going to ask me if I want a fingerprint. Now, if you've been using this exact same IP address for something else, the fingerprints will not match up, and it'll complain about it, and I'll show you how to delete the fingerprint. So it's fingerprinted now, and it's going to ask me the actual password that I created for the installation media, which was secret. Okay, so now we're logged in. Now I just want to exit out of this and show you how to delete that fingerprint if you get that error. So we have this fingerprint already created. So if I go back in, it's just going to ask me the password right away. But if I had the problem where that fingerprint has already been used on a different system, so it's confused, I can use SSH tac keygen and then -R. And this is going to forget the old fingerprint or remove it. Okay, so now when I try to log back into the same system, it's going to ask me again, do you want to fingerprint this? I just want to show you that just in case you have the problem. And it's a secret. Okay, so I am actually SSH'd into this machine back here right now. So if I close this machine running right now, I have this virtual machine. I'm actually SSH'd into it, so I can just continue on. So we can actually just leave that machine there. I can go over here to where all the technical information is. And I actually want to show you something before we go any further. Remember what I said earlier on, that you can set the UEFI in the very beginning, but you can't go back and set it later. So I just want to show that to you. So overview, we don't have this option anymore. It says it's, but there's no option to set it now. But if we look at the XML, we're looking for OS. So right here, this OS, this part right here where it says OS from Y EFI and ends OS here, I've actually put, if you're using the old version, it will probably look something like this for the OS if you forgot to change it to UEFI. And basically you can just select that whole bit and you can replace it with this, and you should be good to go. You should now have, and apply it, you should now have it. And you can only do this when your virtual machine is shut off. So you'll have to shut off the virtual machine, paste it in. That's for any editing of XML or the settings. You have to shut off the virtual machine to do it. And then you should have the UEFI where you can use systemd boot instead of grub. Okay? So that is that. Now, I don't need to do this because I'm SSH'd on a host system. I don't need to check the key maps, but assuming that you're on physical hardware, I just want to show how this would be done. So we can just use local CTL and we can list key maps. So we can go local. We don't have to use sudo for anything because we're root. CTL, and it's list key maps. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of them. If you want to exit out at any time, you can press Q. And I know I'm in the United Kingdom, so I'm looking for UK. And these are the terminal key maps, not the X Windows key maps. So I have UK right there. So if I want to set the UK key map, I would just use load keys UK, and that would set it. And now if I press the @ symbol, I'm not getting the incorrect one that would be up there if it's incorrect. So the keyboard is correct for me now. Although, since I'm SSH'd, it was always correct because that's my host system's keyboard. So, or the guest system's keyboard. Log into the host system. Okay, so we've already changed the password. We have already got our IP address. We've already SSH'd in. That's how you remove it. So now what we need to do is create partitions. So we are in a virtual machine on this, so there's no real worry to delete anything. But if you are doing this, and I'm going to have a manual on later, if you are doing this on bare metal hardware, you want to be very careful with this, because if you have any other device in that system that has an operating system on it, or any other information you don't want to lose, this will just completely get rid of that. So you want to be careful with this. You can do things like installing Linux beside another Linux distro, or besides Windows or something else like that. You can do that. But if you are not careful with this whole creating a partition table part, you will just remove it. So I did put a bunch of warnings up here. And basically, if you are doing this on hardware, the only thing that you can do in this entire section that I'm going to cover, the only thing you can do is add a partition if you already have space available. Do not change the partition table type. Do not remove any partition. Do not, later on, don't change the type of any partition table, and don't, unless it's the one that you just created, but not any existing one. And don't format the boot partition, because if you're dual booting with like Windows and something, the Windows is also using that boot partition, so you will ruin Windows ability. But since this is a VM, we don't care about any of that stuff, and we're just going to go through, because it's not going to matter. This is in a virtual machine. So the first thing we want to do is find out what's the name of the device that we're targeting, and obviously it's in the VM, so it's going to be some kind of virtual device. So we can use lsblk or fdisk-l. So ls, this is list block devices. And I spelled it wrong. lsblk, there we go. So what we're looking for is, we have this loopback device. That is not it. That's the ArcIS, the ISO image for Archlinux, the installer image, and this one as well. But we do have this VDA, and it's 16 gigabytes. And since I know I made the disk 16 gigabytes, it must be this disk. But we can also do fdisk-l. And again, we have this disk here that is VDA. That's a virtual disk, the A one, and it's 16 gigabytes. So I'm pretty positive. But if you're on, again, on bare metal on this, I would remove anything that's storage, any thumb drives, anything else. Unplug any other drives if you can, and just be very careful about it, because this is potentially can ruin other stuff on your machine, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to accidentally delete something, and I've done that many times before. So it is VDA that we're looking for, and it's going to be dev VDA. Since we have that, we're going to fdisk into it. So it's going to be fdisk dev VDA, and I just put all the little different steps here, but I'm just going to talk about them as I do them. So it'll be fdisk dev, and it's VDA, and it's not VDA1 or VDA2. Those would be partitions inside. We're actually creating those partitions. So it's the actual device, which is VDA. Okay, and the very first thing we want to do is check the label. We do not want MBR. Okay, we don't want this MBR at all. And again, if this is not in a virtual machine, you do not want to change this, because you will completely delete everything that's in your system. But since it is in a VM, I want it to be UEFI. So we can print the partition table with P. We can change it to disk type GPT, which is the more modern UEFI version, and we can use that with G. So we can print the partition table here. There's nothing really going on yet, and we will change it. It's G, and now it says it's creating a new GPT disk label. Okay. Now that this is changed, I need to make two partitions. The first partition is going to be the boot partition, and it's not going to be very big, just 500 megabytes or 1 gigabyte. The second partition will be the system partition where everything else is. Okay, so we're going to say new, this for new partition, and we're going to select the default, which is the first one. And we're going to select again the default, which is the first sector it can be in. And now we're selecting the last sector. This means how big this is. And I'm going to say plus, I think I use 512 capital M for megabytes. So it's going to be 512 megabytes in size. I believe that's what I did up here. Yeah. Or you can do 1 gigabyte. It doesn't matter for us. This is virtual machine, only one thing on it. So we did that. Now the type of this is a Linux file system, but that's not what we want. We actually want the type to be a EFI system. If we type T and then 1, T, and we're selecting the first one, we can actually list them all with L. And you'll see up here it says EFI system right here. That's the one we want. So I'm going to press Q on this. Partition type, I'm going to put 1 here. So now we're not Linux file system, we are EFI system. Okay. Now, since we have that boot partition created, the EFI partition, now we need our system partition. So I'm going to press N again for new. Now we're creating a new partition. This one's going to be 2. I'm going to select the default. This is first sector again. I'm going to select the default. Now the end sector, if I don't put anything here, it's going to take up the entire rest of the device, which I'm just going to do. I'm going to take everything, and it is a Linux file system, and that's perfect. Okay, let's make sure I'm not missing anything. We're not creating a swap disk at all. We're not using that. That's old style. So I just put that information in, but I don't recommend you doing that. Creating I've already done that. Okay, so we're just going to write it and exit. Yeah. So at this point, nothing we've done is actually permanent. If we exit out of this now, we haven't actually destroyed our device or wiped it or cleaned it or anything. This is all kind of temporary. This is all what we want to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So when we type W for write, this is when it's going to happen. So at this point, when you type W, whatever changes you wanted to make are going to be made. Okay, so that's done. And I think did it exit us out of it too? The partition of a husband altered. Tim's disk. Okay, so I believe we're done there. Now that we have this partition set up, if we do it again, F disk -L, we see that VDA, there's a VDA 1 and a VDA 2, and that's an EFI and a Linux. That's perfect. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is format the boot drive. Now I am going to format the boot drive. I'm not doing anything with the swap. That's legacy, and I'm not doing anything with the old ext4. I put information here, but I'm just not going to use it. I don't recommend that it is used. So to format the boot sector, we're going to be using a FAT32 format. So we're going to use makefs.fat, and then we're going to use the switch minus capital F32 and the target. For us, it's VDA1. Okay. I'm just going to copy this. And we need to change this SDX1 that doesn't exist to VDA1. So you do have to pay attention that 1 is the first partition on this device, and that was our boot partition. So our boot partition is going to be a Microsoft style FAT32 partition, which is standard. Okay, now the next partition, we're not doing any of this legacy stuff. We're going to be using a ButterFS system. This is the better one. And this was assuming, this SDX3 is assuming that you possibly made a swap partition, which you shouldn't do. But it's the same thing, makefs.butterfs -f. F is for force, just in case there's already a file system there, it will overwrite that file system. And we just need to make sure that this is VDA2 now, because this is our system partition. So you need to know what the name of your system partition is. For me, it's going to be VDA2. Okay. Perfect. Now we will mount this. We need to mount it because we actually need to make sub-volumes inside of it. Okay. And then we're going to unmount it and remount it with the sub-volumes instead. Okay, so there is a mount point already in the install media that we can use, just called /mount. So we're going to mount our device, which will be VDA2, our root device. And we're going to mount it on the file name or directory path name or whatever mount. If that makes sense. So this will be our system partition, the btrfs one. So this will be VDA2 for what we just did. And if I just type mount here, I'll see that it's mounted down here. Dev VDA2 on mount. Yes, cool. We need to create these subvolumes here. So I'm just going to do one, and I'll do each one of them after that. So I'm going to copy this one. So it's btrfs subvolume, and I believe there's a shorter name for this too, but you can just type in the whole thing. Btrfs subvolume. I think it's just sub, and then create or something. I can't remember, but btrfs subvolume create, and this is what we want to call the subvolume. And the subvolume is going to be in mount, and it's going to be just called @ the @ symbol. That's what it's called, and that's going to be our root subvolume. Okay. Now we're also going to have a home one, so it's going to be at home, and we will have a log one, so it'll be at log. We will have a pkg one, and we will have a @snapshots, and that is all of the subvolumes created. Okay, that's all of these. You could just copy and paste them. Since we have the subvolumes created, I'm going to unmount it and remount that root volume, that @ volume correctly with compression and everything else added. So first thing we need to do is unmount this. So we could say umount, and we're umounting mount. That's for unmount. So that's no longer mounted. If I type in mount here, it's no longer showing up at the bottom. Okay. So since that is unmounted, now I can remount it, but I'm going to use this whole long command. So I'm just going to copy this and we'll just kind of walk through it. So this is mount, and I want some options, this -O for options. I'm going to give it some SSD and discard async, no A time, compress ZST level 3, space cache version 2, auto defrag, and the subvolume name is 3. So this subvolume name is the @ symbol is being mounted on mount. Some of these are dealing specifically with SSD devices. However, they will not harm non-SSD devices. They just won't be used, so it's no problem. I think the async, I would have to look these up. I can't remember them off the top of my head. Discard async. This one is for tagging the no A time. This is for tagging when files are accessed. There's no real reason to do this if you're not running a server, if you're just running home computer. This compression right here is for the btrfs compression, and it's using ZSTD, and this is level 3 compression. This is the default. Basically, this, if you were just using the Arch installer, this is what they would give you. The space cache version 2, I think, is the SSD one as well. Auto defrag. So all this. So basically, we need to make sure that this dev SDX3 is correct. For us, it is VDA2. So that is that. Now, the other ones are basically the same. So we just have to kind of think about these. I have them all listed, but home, if @ is root, then home is mount. Oh, sorry. I need to create these. I haven't created these yet. Sorry. So right now, if we were to ls mount, there's nothing there. So I can't mount home to the home folder because it doesn't exist. So we need to create it, which is right here. We're gonna create home, and then we're going to create var log. We're going to create var cache pacman package and .snapshots. We're creating those folders so that we can mount those subvolumes to those folders. So they don't exist, and we're creating a file tree basically for our mount points to happen. So this is right here. So if you want to read this, basically inside the mount folder, it's going to create home. That's a folder. And then it's going to create var. And inside that var folder, it's going to create log. And it's going to create, inside the same var folder, it's going to create another folder called cache besides log. And inside of that, there is pacman. And inside of that, there's pkg. And then it's going to create another one that's next to home and var that is just dot snapshots. So it's creating all these folders. The P is, I believe, so it can make the subfolders. I forget on that one. So if I ls now into mount, see how we have home and var. And if I ls into var, we have cache and log. So those are what we need for the mount point. So if we go up here to this mount right here, and if I type in home, now I can mount this. Okay, and the log one is going to be var log. And these again are written down so you can read them. Var log. And they're all mounted on VDA2. PKG is var cache pacman PKG. And the last one is dot snapshots. And it's going to be at dot snapshot. Okay, so those are all created. Those are all, sorry, they're not created, they're mounted. So our whole Btrfs system is now mounted and ready to go. Except for our boot. I left the boot one down here because if you did choose the ext4 version, it would work for both of them by doing it after the fact. So where is it? So right here, we also need to create the boot right here folder. Oops. Sometimes it adds extra garbage. So I've just did the same thing that I did above here. I just made mount boot exist. But the way we mount the boot one is different because boot is a different, boot is a different type, file system type. It's a VFAT. So we're going to use these switches instead. And you can look up what all these do. This is just the safe way to mount a boot system. So the one thing that we need to do here is make dev SDX1. This is going to be VDA1 for us. Yeah. And again, this is what Archlinux does by default. So I'm just going to grab this one command here. So this is going to be VDA1. Now, it's not VDA2, it's VDA1 because this is the boot. So we're mounting a different partition into the boot folder. Okay, that is all good to go now. So now we're going to do kind of the normal things that we do. We want the closest mirror, so we're going to run reflector. We want to enable parallel downloads, and this is about the installation media. So we're going to run reflector for the installation media. We're going to turn on parallel downloads for the installation media, which is just uncommenting the comment in front of parallel. And we are going to resync the package list from the server. We're not going to update anything. There's no U here, but we're just grabbing the package list just to make sure that we're up to date. So that's reflector. Okay. And then we are going to use a sed command. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, after the delimiter, I'm going to use the caret because I want it to make sure it's looking at the beginning of the line. And the pound symbol is what I want to get rid of. And it's power. I just need it to match enough. And we need the delimiter again on the back. And this is etc pacman. And I'm just going to look at it real quick. I grep And it looks like it's uncommented. Good. Okay, and the pacman -s, capital S, sorry, YY. And this is not updating, this is just updating the package list. That's all it's doing. So now that we have that, we're going to look at these. I just want to talk about these real quick. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So this is installing exactly what gets installed if you use the Arch installer. So this is installing the other thing. I added a couple things at the end here, the very bottom line, but let's just walk through the top. So we need the base package that kind of sets up a file tree and a bunch of other stuff. We need Linux, firmware, base, Devil, ButterFS progs. All these stuff get installed by default just for any system. And then down here, the next line down, this line here, these get installed anytime any desktop gets installed, no matter what the desktop is. And this line right here is all the open source graphical drivers that gets installed. Pipewire, this is, if you select Pipewire, this is what gets installed, Pipewire all the way to WirePlumber. And if you choose the the KDE Plasma desktop, it installs these packages here, specifically. Now, these packages here I add, the pacman contrib. Some of these aren't really needed for the virtual environment, but I just put them on anyway. libva-utils, comp size, Mesa demos, Firefox. Now this last one I'm going to leave off, this KDE applications. I think that you should install this, but to save me time showing this, I'm going to leave that off. And it is not installed by default by Arch install. So this KDE applications does not get installed by Arch install, but I think that you should install it because it is good. So I'm going to grab this whole thing here, just up to the Firefox, and I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it in here. And there it goes. And you see it's downloading 5 things at a time. It'll download the biggest packages first, I believe. So these packages will go slow, and as it downloads more of them, they'll start speeding up faster and faster. And it looks like we got 724 packages installed. So I'm going to let that happen, and we can just keep looking through this stuff. So after we've installed these packages, we need to generate the fstab, and we can do this with the gen fstab. And we're going to tell it to only look at things that are mounted on mount. So it's not going to mount everything. It's not going to generate everything. It's only going to generate things that have been mounted on mount. And then we're telling it where to append this output to, and we're going to append it to the fstab that's inside of our mount. Where we're targeting this install at. This isn't strictly needed, but I do think there is systemd network configuration files that are generated that are on the installation media, and they're really good default configurations to have. We don't need them using Network Manager. We don't need them at all. However, they're just good because later on you might not want to use Network Manager. So since they're already there, they're not in a package, but they're on the installation media, I'm just going to copy them over. And they're just generic stuff. They're telling it how to use, they're telling it how to get an IP address. It's just basic systemd network configs. How to get it through a wireless connection, how to get it through a wired connection, everything else. So if you weren't using Network Manager that you use for KDE Plasma, you would need these anyway. So I'm just going to copy them over. They're just a couple four config text files. And then we're going to chroot into the Arch environment, the new one. We're going to use Arch chroot, and the environment is here in mount. So we're going to be kind of inside of it artificially. It's not really booted up, but we are inside of it. So we won't have the ability to run system CTL stuff like system config, system control. We can display stuff, but we can't set stuff unless it's booted into it. So there is other ways to do it, but what I'm going to do is set what I can set and then reboot the system and set the other stuff like the locals and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to chroot into it. This is setting up systemd boot. So the systemd boot is installed. And then we need to set some entries for systemd boot. And this is just an echo. It's just going to create a file, and the file is over here. It's going to create it in boot. Now you notice mount is not here because we're chroot into it, but it's going to create bootloader entries Archlinux. And this is dynamically using block ID to get the number here for the root partition ID. Okay, so I'm using this command up here to dynamically get that number and throw it in there. And then there's another one for a fallback. So this is, again, what's created by default by the arch install. I don't know how they do it, but they're creating something like this. And if you want to see these options show up, we have to uncomment the timeout. So I'm uncommenting the timeout in boot loader config. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And then we need to make ourselves a user, but we also need to be able to add that user to the sudo, give them sudo access or sudo privilege. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use anybody who's in the wheel group, any new user that you create and you add to the wheel group, they're going to have sudo privilege. And it's not going to ask them every time for the password. So I'm just going to uncomment this one line from the sudoers file. It's just removing the hash space. That's all that this sed command is doing. That gives anybody in the wheel group sudo access. I'm also going to create a ZRAM generator config, which is going to give us 2 times. By default, it'll give us half our physical RAM as a ZRAM swap, but you can actually, with ZSTD, you can have 4 times compression. So basically, you can take half of your physical RAM and you can make it 4 times bigger than that, which would be double the physical RAM. You know, if you're taking half of it, times 4 would be double physical RAM. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying, hey, I want the ZRAM size to be double my physical RAM size. And I want the compression style to be ZSTD. Okay, so that is ZRAM config. You can read about that over here. If you want to read about ZRAM, it allows us to have swap space, but that is compressed into RAM. It works really well, and it's really good for devices, say Raspberry Pis or old laptops, Chromebooks, things like that that have minimal system, RAM. This is really helpful. So we're just going to set that. That's just a text file that I'm echoing stuff into. So it's just generating that text file. We're going to enable the parallel downloads into our installed system like we did into the installer media. We are going to enable Network Manager for KDE. We are also going to enable SSH because we're not booting into the graphical yet. So I'm going to enable SSH so I can SSH into the system again, but you'll want to disable that later so if you're not using it. We will create a root password. We'll create a new user by using user add -m and the username that we're creating. And then we're going to use capital G wheel to add them to the wheel group. And then we will create a password for our new user. At this point, we can exit the chroot environment and we can reboot our system. Now we can actually be logged into our installed system, but it won't be graphical yet because I want to set some locals. Since we're logged into it, we can use the date time control. We can use the host name control. We can use the local control. We can use all these kind of systemd commands to set up a bunch of stuff. Let me just see where we're at. Oh, we're done. Cool. Okay, so let's just start doing stuff. Okay, so all these packages are installed now. And let me just show you what this looks like without creating this file. So I'm not going to output it. This right here is a redirect that's appending a file. So this file may already exist, but it doesn't have anything in it. So this isn't going to stop on the file and recreate it. It's just going to append to the end of it. But I'll just show you what this command looks like by itself. I'm going to clear this, put this file. Now this will show us the mount points that are just for mount. Okay, these are the ones that we created, so we don't have to retype them out again. And it also has our UUID as well for it. So this is the VDA2, this is the root mount, the home mount, the log, the package, the snapshots, and here's the boot one. So all that stuff is good to go. And we are going to be redirecting this to mount etc, and this is fstab. I'm going to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. Mount etc fstab. So this is going to put that in that file now. So now if we cat this file out, oh, let me clear the screen first. Okay, this is what's, see, there was already some stuff right here that was already in the file, nothing big, but we left it there. We just added to the end of it our mount points. Okay, so that is creating the fstab so that when the system boots up, it's able to mount the system and all the other stuff. Again, we don't need this, but I think this is good to have. These are really good configuration files that already exist on the installation media, and they're not installed by packages. You would have to manually create these. I'm just going to copy them. It's just very easy to copy them over, so why not? And let me just show you what they are. Oops. So there are 3 files in here. Let's see. W. ETH. So this is what's in the file. It's just saying for any network adapter that starts with EN or ETH, and it's setting up DHCP, it's setting up DNS, all this, they're just basic things. They will not be used for Network Manager, but again, if you had some reason to not use Network Manager later, you're probably going to have to manually create this file. So they're already there. And that would be in the installation on setting up your networking and all that. You'll find that in there. So we're going to do our chroot into this new environment to do some more commands. So this is arch chroot, which is a special Archlinux version of chroot. And our target is mount. Okay, so now if you see it was root at arch ISO, now it's slightly different. Okay, so we want to create this boot control. We're going to use boot control install to install the systemd boot. Okay. And since that's installed, like I said, we need some entries. Okay. I'm just going to show you that there's nothing there. Oops. The OS. That doesn't exist, and I think nothing in here exists. Yeah. Okay. And I also want to show you this other command right up here. What's going on with this? And for this command, we will need to make sure we are targeting the correct device, which for me it is VDA2. Okay, so that is the output. That is my partition UUID for the VDA device partition 2. So if we didn't just put -o value, we would get it in print in quotations, I think, or we get it like this, which that output is no good. So just the output that we want, if I embed it into this echo right here. So if I echo all this out, but I need to make sure that it is going to the right place. Where is it? Dev VDA2, that needs to be your root, your target root partition. So that is correct for me. So I'm going to hit enter on this. Now it should have created that file. right there. That file exists, and we can just cat that file out. Okay, let me clear the screen. So it created title Archlinux, Linux. This is the kernel. It says Linux, and it is VM Linux with a Z Linux. Initial RAM disk device is going to be initial RAM FS Linux image. And the options here is, this is what it was dynamically getting, this number right here. And it is also turning Z swap off, which is not ZRAM. Z swap is a different thing. So it's disabling that because it'll mess with ZRAM. And this is our root partition right here, the @ and our file system type is btrfs, and it's read-write. So now we're going to do it for the other one. It's going to be the same thing. This is just slightly different one. The RAM disk on this one will be slightly different. Okay, so this one is the initial RAM disk is the fallback image now. That's the only thing that's different. And I also want to change the timeout. And I'm just going to do that by uncommenting it with this sed command. And what I did here is I'll just cat out this file. This timeout 3, it used to be commented out with a £, and now it's not. Okay. And now we get to the part where we have this. Let me just show you this file, or I'll grep it out, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Wheel. How about that? We'll grep wheel. So we have this isn't the whole file. This is just the lines that have wheel in it. So basically, you can, if you want any user in the wheel group to have sudo access, one of these two lines, the top one, if I uncomment this, if I remove the comment in the space, it will give me access to sudo, but it'll always ask me for a password. The second one, it says, hey, you are in this group. I'm going to give you access, and I'm not going to ask you for a password. So it's just me being lazy. I'm going to uncomment this second one. And the way I'm going to the way that I'm going to uncomment is with this sed command here. It's just this line here twice, except the first time I'm looking for at the beginning of the line this pound space, and the second time I'm removing that. So that's what this sed command is doing. Or you could nano into it, or however you want to do it. And now if I look at it again, do you see how this one is uncommented for no password? See that? That means any user that I create in there is going to be like that. Let's just do the user real quick. So right here, I'm just going to create a new user and put them in the wheel group. So, whoops. So I'm going to call this user PR for Programming Rainbow. So it says add user, -m sets up the folders and all that stuff that you need. The -G puts me in the wheel group because I put wheel here. Okay. And I need a password for that. So pass WD and PR for the name of the person I'm going to add a password to, and I'm going to make it a secret. Okay. And while we're adding passwords, I'm going to set the root password to secret as well. Okay. Now I think I skipped down, so let me go back up. So now we have a root password set, and we have a user that's in the wheel group, so it has sudo access, and there is a password set on that new user. Okay. So right here, this gets generated with just this one entry in it right here, but I think it doesn't get generated until we reboot. So if we create this file right here without this top command here, what will happen is we'll get these other two in there, but then when we reboot, this never gets created, and so it doesn't work. So we need, since we haven't actually booted into this running system yet, we're just chrooted into it, we need to actually add this top line here too. So in the other ones I had, we didn't have to do this, but we do have to do it this way. So I'm just gonna, these are echoes again, and then I'm gonna show you the file. Okay, so the thing in the file is zram0 in brackets, and then compression algorithm is set to zstd, and zram size that'll be the zram swap size, is set to physical RAM size, the size of the physical RAM times 2. Okay, and I'll show you that later. I also want to do I did this exact same thing earlier, where I uncommented the parallel downloading. I need to do it for this installed system too. We can set that here, and again, I'll just show you what I just did. I'll just cat this out, and up here, parallel down, it was commented out, now it's not. So now it'll let us do 5 downloads at a time. Okay, we do want Network Manager enabled so that we can have an IP address, and this works just fine in the virtual machine. It'll just give us our IP address like it has a standard category 5 cable plugged in or something. So I'm just going to enable that. So that's Network Manager enabled. Let me just look slowly through here. I didn't miss anything. That's done. Yep. Network Manager is installed. I'm going to re-enable SSHD because I'm still going to be logging in with SSH. You don't have to do this. If you're not using SSH, then you don't need to enable it, because it is giving you another doorway into your system. So when you're not using SSH, you don't want it enabled. Okay, and so I'm going to do that because I'm going to be using my console here still with it. So I'm going to enable it. That's enabled. You can always use disable it later to disable it. Now we've set the password, we've created the user, we've set that password. Now we're going to exit out of this chroot environment and we're going to reboot our system. Okay, now I did not set SSDM, so we're not going to boot into a graphical user interface. We are still going to be in a text mode because we need to set the locals and stuff. We need to set like the keyboard, the X11 keyboard, the country codes, things like that. So it's just easier for us to reboot one time and then do it that way, because I can use all the simple commands instead of actually going in and editing parts of files. So I'm going to exit this. This is this chroot. Now I'm back into the normal and I'm going to reboot. So let me just switch back over here and you'll see this machine right here. If I pull this up, if you just watch right here on the side, when I type in reboot, that machine is going to reboot. Watch. There it goes. It's rebooting. Oops, it's disconnected. It's going to reboot up. And we have the option showing that those are the 2 options we created to boot up. And now it's going to boot and it's going to drop us right into the command line where it's going to ask us for a password. Okay. Now we actually don't need to log in here. I could go and log in here, but I want to use my terminal. It's easier for me. So I'm just going to make sure the IP address is the same, or if it's changed. It was 95, and now it's 96. Okay. So I'm just going to use my SSH again, but I'm going to use 96 this time. Okay, and it's asking me fingerprint, and now I've messed up. I've asked it to SSH in with root. This will be refused. I know the password is secret, but it's going to be refused because normally you cannot SSH into a root. See, it's denied permission. I didn't type in the password wrong. It's because I did it root. So I'm going to cancel this. The root is available to SSH into with the install media, but not my installed system. I didn't enable that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into my user account, which is PR, and it's still 96. And that should let me do that. There we go. So now I'm in. That you need to do this when you're actually in your system. Okay. So I'm just going to leave that there. I don't need to do anything with that. I'm going to go back here and we're going to start doing things. So if you need to find out what time zone you're in, we can use sudo, we can use time date control and list time zones, and it'll just chuck out a whole list. So I piped it into more so it shows you it only fills up the page, and then you can press enter to see more and more of them. So that's just a pipe more to allow you to read it easily. So I'm going to do this. I already know what mine is, but just so you can see what yours is, there's Africa there. There's the Americas. Okay. And you can press Q anytime to get out of this. And you could, of course, grep. I could pipe this into grep and say, I want the UK. I know it's not UK, it's Europe, London. So if I just grep London, okay, and it is case sensitive. So that's what I'm looking for me, Europe, London. So that's that. We haven't set it. This is how we set it right here. So you're going to want to change Europe, London to yours. This is just time, date, control, set time zone, and then the time zone you want to set. Okay, so that's actually set it now. And I want the enable network time synchronization. This is all done with the, like I said, the Archlinux install script does the same thing. So this is time, date, control, CTL, and we're set NTP to true. This is going to set it to true and enable it. So the time server that checks if your system clock is updated to the internet's system clock is correct. Okay. We want to set a host name. I don't believe there's a host name set by default, so I'm just going to set it to Archlinux. And what this is doing is this is going to create a file called, is it host names? etc. I think it's host name. Let's see. Oh, there it is. We cat this out. I'll just say Archlinux. There we go. So we could have just put that in there, but the command makes me feel special, I guess. I don't know. So there's our host name. Now there is no way around this one. We have to go in and we have to edit this file. We could set it. We could use the sed command to do it, but I'm just going to show you with nano. We need to go into local, and you need to choose the local that you want to enable. Or I believe you can enable multiple, but I know which one I'm looking for. So in this file, I just opened up with nano, so you can use your arrow keys. And for me, I need to go down to ENGB, English Great Britain. I think I went past it, actually, because I'm in ES right now. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to use the UTF-8 version right here. So I'm going to uncomment this. So I'm going to delete that pound sign. And then I'm going to press Control X. And it's going to save modified buffer. Yes. And it's going to ask me, do you want the file to be called etc local.gen? And that is correct. So that's where that's saved. Now that I've done this, I can actually now generate the local, which is going to be sudo local gen. So that would just kind of let me do it. Now it uncommented, it said that it's available. Now this command is going to find any of them that are uncommented and generate them. Okay, so that is generated for me, but we're not done yet. We got to set it. So again, for me, that was ENGB UTF-8. So whatever yours is, you'll need to change that. So it's going to be local control set local space capital LANG lang equals, and then whatever your local is. Okay, so that is set now. And now we have the keyboard map. You may have already seen this keyboard map before when we were setting it earlier for UK. This is the exact same thing. So if you already know what it is, it's the exact same thing. You don't even need to look at this. But for me, this is UK. This is just the terminal keyboard. Yeah. At the very bottom, it's UK. I'm just going to press Q. And now we're not using load key like we did before. That was just setting it. We're permanently setting it this time. So we're going to use this local CTL set key map. And then mine, again, is UK, so you would want to change it to whatever yours is. Okay, so that is just the terminal key. But what about X11 keys? If, I don't know how Wayland works with this actually, but we can just set our X11 keys. And Arch install does this as well. So if we want to get a list of our X11 key maps, I think we need to put this into more as well. Yeah, it just did the whole thing. So I'm going to pipe this into more. So it only gives us, from A down to whenever it ran out of space on the screen. And for me, I know mine is GB as in Great Britain, not UK. It's GB. It's a bit confusing. So yeah, we'll need to pipe that into more just so you can read it easier. And so this is going to be the local CTL, and it's going to be set minus X11 minus key map. Okay. Now, if you're using a SSDM, I think it defaults to the US keyboard automatically, but once you start typing, then it flips back to your country. And it's slightly annoying. So you can actually tell this to, hey, just be the thing. So since I know mine is GB already, I can use set X key B map to GB. And I can put that in the SSDM scripts for X setup. And what's going to happen is every time SDDM starts up, it's going to now default to the British keyboard instead of telling me it's American keyboard and then switching. This is a minor thing, and we need to use sudo for this, but we can't use sudo echo. That doesn't work. So we have to sudo bash -c and then throw the whole echo into a comment there, into a double quotations. And so then I'm using a single quotation inside. But you're going to need to, if you're doing this step, you can just skip it if you don't care. But if you're doing this step, you're going to need to change GB to whatever you were using up here, whatever you found here when it was list, whatever that X11 is. So that is for SDDM to not be annoying. And I'll show that to you later. Also, SDDM and other things default to the wrong cursor. When we have Breeze installed, they don't default to Breeze, they default to this other cursor. I find that annoying too, so I'm going to change that so it's using the Breeze cursor. Again, you don't need to do this, it's a minor thing. Okay. In the virtual machine, this doesn't matter, but on any normal system, you're probably also going to want to enable Bluetooth. And I think the Arch install does not do this by default, but I'm just going to put it here. I'm just going to enable it. I think it's just fine to have it enabled, but you can enable it, disable it, doesn't really matter. Now we're basically done with this whole thing. Now we can boot into a real system. So the last thing that we're going to do is enable SDDM. Now, since I'm not going to be using SSH again, I'm going to disable SSH. Maybe I'll put that in there as a step. So I'm going to say sudo systemctl disable. It's still going to be running right now, but when it reboots, it's going to disable it. SSHD. So I still have access right now. So I want to enable SDDM. Sudo systemctl enable SDDM. This is the login manager for KDE. And I know it gives this complaint. I forgot to look this up, but it still works. Okay, so now we can actually throw in a reboot. So I'm going to put it back onto this screen again here. I'm going to pull up this, and I'm going to say reboot. I need to do sudo because I'm not root. Okay, and you see it rebooting in the background. Now we should actually boot into graphics. Okay, so do you see my mouse is using the correct Breeze cursor theme? And the layout is GB. Normally this would say US until I started typing, then it would switch to GB. So it actually says by default. So I'm going to put in my secret. Okay, so let me just change a couple annoying things real quick. I'm just going to set this theme to dark. And then I'm going to make the text size bigger. You can change the scaling of the whole screen, but you're just really reducing your resolution. So I'm going to just change the font size because I don't want all the elements to become bigger. I don't want every single thing to become bigger. I just want the font to be bigger because I'm using a 14-inch screen at 1080p. It's a little bit hard to read the fonts for me. So if you don't care about this, you don't need to change it, but I'm just going to set these 10-point fonts to 14 and the 8 to 12. This is the 8 one right here, the smaller one, so I'm going to change this to 12. Okay, I'm going to apply this. Some effects may happen after reboot, but they should all pretty much be working. Okay, so that is that. We already have Firefox installed. Let me just look. Oops, I'm trying to go to my. I'm trying to go here. Let me just see what I'm doing here. I'm going to set up Firefox, and then I'm going to start working on Xrdp. Okay, cool. Over here. Okay, so in Firefox, I'm going to disable AV1 because I don't have a single graphics card that can actually hardware decode AV1, but Google tries to push out AV1 videos to everybody, making sure everybody's software encodes. This doesn't matter for a VM, but I just do this anyway. So I'm going to go to About, Config. This is just something I always do. It's gonna it'll instead switch it over to VP9 or VP8 or X264. And now, if you have a graphics card that can do AV1, you know that's different. Also, in the VM, I don't think this matters at all because it's going to be software rendered no matter what. Okay, so I actually use AdGuard's DNS to block ads, to block cookies, to block trackers, to block things like that, certain things. So I use their DNS, so it's in, and I use DNS over HTTPS to make it more secure. So I do this in network PRR. This is only if you want to do this. So here, I'm not going to put the AdGuard address. I'm actually going to put the IP address. So the address doesn't need to be resolved. 94.140.14.14, or you can go .15.15. If you don't have access, don't do this. And if you suddenly go offline, remove this or reset it back. If you suddenly end up offline, something went wrong, or you can't get DNS through that. I don't know. Now, to force this, I don't want it to allow anything else to happen at all. I'm going to set this to mode 3. Mode 3 is going to force this. And I also want to add some extensions. Say like uBlock. I'm going to add uBlock origin. This also blocks, ads, trackers, things like that. Okay, and if you're in the EU, you have the cookie problem. You got the cookie pop-ups that are annoying where you think that you're opting out and you're not really opting out. There is I still don't care about cookies. This is again for European people. It's going to automatically remove permission for these cookies that they're still going to do anyway, but it also just makes it go away so you don't see it. Okay, and I'm going to do a little sponsor block. Okay, that gives us something pretty good usable. Now we can go to GitHub. Not GitHub. Okay, make this a little bigger. Okay, we are in the virt-manager manual install. So if we were to clone this, in here in Archlinux, in Programming Rainbow, I have the color schemes for Breeze, but using the Capuchin color schemes. So it's still using the Breeze theme, but coloring in with Capuchin colors. So if you want to grab this, you can just grab this URL up here, and you can open up a terminal. And we could go git clone. I don't know if I have git installed. Sudo pacman -s git. You know what? I'll do this after while we're waiting for the thing to compile. I'm going to come back to this in a second here just to speed things up. So virt-manager manual install is what we're looking at. And I don't like this. Close. So I want to get going on this Xrdp, and it's going to compile so we can come back to this. So Xrdp, we need to build 3 AUR packages. We're going to need Xrdp, we need Xorg Xrdp, and we need pipewire module Xrdp. Okay, and I'll talk about this in a second. I just want to get them going. So we need git installed, and then we need fuse, imlib, nasm, these first 4 or 5. We need these for the first package, and then this one we need for the second package. So I'm just going to install these right now. Okay. And now when those are installed, I'm going to clone each of these at the same time. So this is just https :// archlinux.org, and then it's xrdp.git. Now this isn't the git package. It just, all packages are called git. Okay, so I'm going to grab this, just this part right here. Okay, that one, and the next one is going to be Xorg Xrdp, and then the last one is pipewire module. Okay, now I'm going to cd into Xrdp, and I'm going to use make, without using sudo, make package -i, and that's going to start building that. Okay, so now that we're building that, I'm going to go over to here, and we're going to look at that. So Xrdp, here's the Archlinux for Xrdp. This is using the remote desktop protocol. This is another way for us to log into a system remotely over a network. And so we can use this instead of virt-viewer to log into this same system, or we could log into another system. So we do need 4 packages. We need FreeRDP installed on the guest system, and that's already packaged up by Archlinux, so there's no problem there. But then we need Xrdp, we need Xorg Xrdp, and for audio, we need pipewire module Xrdp. And these are part of the AUR. So here is Xorg RDP in the AUR. Here is the Xorg Xrdp, and here is the pipewire module Xrdp. There's also, if you want to play around with virgl instead of LLVM pipe, if you want to try to get hardware acceleration running, you can, instead of Xorg RDP, you can replace that package with Glamour for AMD or with the NVIDIA package. And these things will give you access to virgl, which is the OpenGL implementation. For my system, this is actually much slower, but you can try it, you can play with it. It's just like in virt-manager switching to virt-io to get virgl. It's the same thing, except it's even slower here, I find. But it could be just my system, so you can play around with them. Just know that these 3 packages here are exclusive. You can only have one of them installed. Okay? So let's flip back and see where we are. Okay, so this already compiled. I'm going to say yes on that. So I'm going to cd, I'm going to back up 1 level and go to Xorg Xrdp. And I'm going to run the same command, except there's a problem with this package where the PGP check fails because there's a mistake in the package. So we're going to do skip PGP check. And that's going to start compiling this package. Okay. Now I'm going to open up a new tab here. And what I was trying to tell you about before, I think, did I? Oops. So did I already install? No, I didn't. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to just grab the Archlinux part of this, of GitHub. I'm going to copy this URL. And then in here, I'm going to git clone and that URL. Okay. That's going to clone the Archlinux. And what I'm looking for in Archlinux, what I'm looking for is this color schemes. And what I want to do is I want to move this to local share. So I'm going to use mv color schemes. And I'm going to put it in the ~forward.local. That's the hidden local folder for my user, and share. So now if I just ls this, I should see color schemes here. Okay, so color schemes is here. So now that it's here, let me just go back to this compilation right here. I'm going to say yes to install that. And I'm going to cd back up one level again. That's the ... It says go back one level. And we're going to go to Pipewire. And I'm just going to hit the star. That's a kind of a wild card. Just I know there's only one directory there that starts with pipe, so it's going to automatically go into it. And this one builds just like the other one. Okay, so that's building. So while that's building, I'm going to go into here, then to my settings. Now the way this works is we're going to go down to colors and themes. And these are not themes that I just gave you. They are color schemes for these themes. So there's 3 dark and 1 light. So the very first thing you want to do is set to light breeze for the light color scheme if you want to use it, or set it to dark breeze for the dark color scheme if you want to use it. And then go to colors, and you'll see that there are 4 color schemes here. Again, set the theme, the dark one first before using the dark color. So I'm going to use this mocha right here. I'm going to apply it, and it's just changing the colors. So now I'm going to get these pastel colors, the dark theme for cappuccino. Yeah, that's just if you want to use it, it's there. So I'm going to say yes on this last one here. Okay, so now we have Xrdp installed on to this, and this will be the host system. We do need to enable. I'm going to cd in the top. I'm going to do a sudo systemctl enable and Xrdp. I need to enable the service. Now I need to start it as well. Okay, one more thing I need to do. I need to create an xinit file. Let's see. I just down here, I go down right here. I'm creating a file, just this xinit rc file, and it has desktop session equals plasma, and then it starts start plasma, the X11 version. So I'm going to copy this. Okay, and we can just cat this file out. Okay, so those 2 lines are there. Show it again. Okay, this gives us access to running both Xrdp or start X from the command line, and it'll start up the X session. So what we need to do is disable and stop the SDDM from running. So I think I need to reboot for this to work, but I'm going to do sudo systemctl, and again, this is just so we can use Xrdp. You can re-enable this later on if you don't want to use Xrdp and you want to use SDDM. So I'm going to say disable SDDM. So it's disabled. When I say when I say stop, I'm probably just going to get a black screen. It's not going to drop me back to the terminal helpfully. So what I'm going to do is just restart the VM. Yeah, I don't think it's going to. So what I'm going to do is force reset it. Okay, so we should come back to a text prompt. It should not go graphical this time. Okay, that's perfect. Let me just get the IP address one last time. I don't know if it's changed or not. 96, and it looks like it's still 96. Okay, so now if we log in and then type start X, we will get back into the KDE Plasma, not SDDM, but just KDE Plasma. But now we can also, I'll just go over here to an empty window, and we can let's just go. Sorry, let me go back to my notes. Let me just show you one last thing. We do need this package installed, pacman, and this is going to be on the guest system. And this is already a package, so we don't need to compile it or anything. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. I already have it installed. Okay, so that is already installed for me. It's called virt-RDP. And we need to find out what keyboard we can use with, otherwise it's going to default to an American keyboard. So since I'm using a British keyboard, I want to find out what keyboard I can use. And I could put more on this. I can grep more. So it, you know, so you can see we got Albania, we got Arab, we got Belgium, all kinds of stuff. I'm looking for the UK one. It's going to be probably at the bottom. I can also just quit this and just grep United. And that's going to give me United Kingdom, United States, all that stuff. So I know the keyboard I want is this number right here. This is the hex number. So whatever one you're looking for, remember this number on the left is what you're looking for. Okay, that's for the keyboard. And now we have this very long command to start up. And I don't actually remember what everything does on it. So the very first thing is the layout. So if you just don't care and you want to use the American keyboard layout, that's fine. You can just delete it. I'm going to go up here and copy this. Where this says layout, I'm going to put that there. But if you don't want, you can delete this all the way up to KBD. This next one means the color depth is 32-bit, dynamic resolution, GFX, use the fast LAN, RFX is on, sound is on, video is on. This IP address needs to be the IP address of your host system, which is the VM. So it's going to be 192.1, sorry, 192.168.122, and I think it's 96 that I'm working with right now. Right here, if you're in a floating window manager, this is going to be the size of the window it creates on your screen. It's going to be scaled for you. Since I'm in a floating tile manager, this is more headache than it's worth, so I'm going to actually set it to 1080p. So I'm going to use 1080 here and then 1920 here. Okay, now this password, you should not put this password here. You should just delete the /p password part, all of this, and it'll just ask you your password. But since I'm lazy and I trust that you won't share my password, I'm going to put this here. But you should definitely not put a password in a command line ever. So that's just me being lazy. Don't do that. And my user, you do need this one, is PR, the user. So you need the user, you need the IP address. Don't put your password in at the command line. This is just demonstration. So now this should create, I'm going to come over here to an empty desktop. This should create it's going to ask me about the certificate. I'm going to say yes. This should start up KDE back here. Okay, and the network manager does ask my password. There is the Xrdp page for Archlinux does talk about this. I don't really care about it, so I'm going to leave it. And now we are in X11, and if we look here at the system settings, about the system, we're using LLVM pipe. If we compiled for my AMD system, if we compiled the other one, now I don't think this works in a virtual machine, but say I was using Xrdp to log into another physical machine that was in the AMD. If I had compiled xorg xrdp glamour, I could get vir-gl running here instead. But again, it's not faster for me, so I'm happy with this. This is fine. So this is the way that I recapture my keyboard from this is the rightmost control key. If I press that, I actually have access to moving away from there again. So just remember that's the rightmost control key. And let me just, so that was how to set up Xrdp. And we already did the theme. Now, if you ever have a problem with your system and it breaks and you really want to log back into the system to fix it because you don't want to lose the information, or you just need to mount it, or maybe an update went wrong and it broke and you don't want to lose your system, you can use the installation media to boot back up. But instead of installing, you can just start mounting your mount points. So you would need to make sure that this VDA2 is in fact your root partition. And the very bottom one is VDA1 here. You would need to make sure that is your boot partition, not your root partition. These other ones are your root. So you can use these commands right here with your install media booted up to mount into the broken system to be able to fix it or to be able to get information from it if you need to. So I put that at the bottom here. Those are all the mount points to be able to mount back in, because it is btrfs, which is complicated to remount. So I think that's going to be everything. If you're not using SSH, you want to disable it. If you're not using Xrdp, you will want to disable it. You can always enable it whenever you want to. And if you want to get back to SDDM, just go ahead and enable it and reboot or start it. Either way, if you just start it, it'll boot back into your... You cannot run both a graphical and an Xrdp session at the same time. It's one or the other. So when you end one, you can start the other one. Okay. So I do need to leave. I have to rush. I'm sorry for that. I hope that was educational or entertaining. This is how to install Archlinux completely manually with using virt-manager and no arch install script, just completely manually. And let me show that I didn't show this yet. Let me show, I would show HTOP, and we should see our, see right here, our swap space. It says I have 7.6 gigs, even though my physical RAM is only 3.8 gigs. Okay, so the ZRAM is set up and working, and it's 2 times physical RAM. That's what I set it to. Okay, so that is working. And the compression, that my system will be about half the size it would be if I wasn't using the ZST level 3 compression that I'm using. But basically, this is the exact same system that you would get if you use the arch install script. This is pretty much doing everything. A couple little things are slightly different, but everything else is pretty much the same. Okay, so thanks for watching and have a nice day.